Hey, hello again, everyone, and welcome back for our next installment of Building Body Paragraphs. So in our last video, we focused on setting up our topic sentence and then performing the first round of our IC method for text A. And so now we're going to start thinking about how we make the shift to discuss the second text and to perform that second round of our IC method. Great, so again, this is building body paragraphs. This is part 2, where we are making the connection. So in other words, the connection doesn't happen in the first half of the body paragraph. The first half of the body paragraph, you stay focused on text A. It's when you shift to text B that you start making the connection between the two texts. Okay, so as we did for the last video, do take some quick notes. I will be making the slides available to you, but in order to answer the review questions at the end of the video, you'll want those notes fresh and handy. Okay, so if you may, okay. The cats are here and making their little cameos. So you may recall from the end of the last video, we left on this very dramatic cliffhanger, right? And so we were thinking, how many times do we perform the IC method in each body paragraph? And so, of course, that answer then is twice. Okay, and we're performing it one time for each of the two texts. Okay, and so with that in mind, right, if each body paragraph performs the IC method twice, we start getting a sense of what the overall structure of our body paragraphs will look like. And this will allow us to work up what we'll call a template, a body paragraph template, that we can refer to for the rest of the semester for all of the remaining essays. And that template will also serve, I think, as a useful resource for you when you move into XPOS. Okay, so the basic structure for the body paragraph then, again, we're starting with that topic sentence, as we saw in the last video. Then we perform our IC method for text A, and then the IC method for text B, okay? And that's the basic structure. So through the course of this video, we're gonna fill that structure in a little bit. Okay, and so again, for the first video, we focused on the IC method for text A, and that gets you to the middle of your body paragraph. Okay, and at that point, in the middle of the body paragraph, we need to shift over to our second text, which we'll be referring to as text B, and to our second round of IC. Okay, what we want to keep in mind is we don't want to switch from one text to the other all of a sudden in the middle of the body paragraph. So in other words, we don't want to just be talking about Gladwell and then just randomly, all of a sudden in the middle of the body paragraph, we just start talking about who. Okay, so your reader will be thinking, okay, I thought this paragraph was focusing on Gladwell. What's who doing here? Why did we switch, right? So they're going to be confused. So we need to make sure that we transition from one text to the other, and that transition will take place in the middle of that body paragraph. Okay, so to create a smooth transition between the IC that we perform for text A and the IC we perform for text B, we need to signal to the reader the connection we are about to explore between the two texts for the remaining half of the body paragraph. Okay, and that's what we're going to call our transition connection or connection transition. Okay, so in other words, what we're going to do then in the middle of that body paragraph, we're going to aim to create what we'll call a connection transition sentence or two. Okay, and that connection transition sentence is going to set up the conceptual link between the two texts. Okay, and so an example of a connection transition sentence, one that would make sense for essay 1. So particularly for a body paragraph that discusses Gladwell first, that sets up a particular claim that Gladwell makes about, let's say, traditional, right, or civil rights movement activism, and then shifts to Hugh to the second half, for the second half of the body paragraph, to demonstrate how she complicates or challenges that particular claim of Gladwell's. Right? And again, keeping that focus on how she is complicating and challenging a particular claim of Gladwell is, of course, making sure that our body paragraphs stay focused on answering the overall prompt question, right? And in other words, to make sure that those body paragraphs stay connected to our thesis statement, at the end of the intro, which of course is our answer to the question of the prompt. Okay, so for a body paragraph then that shifts from Gladwell, a particular claim he makes about civil rights movement activism, to Hugh to demonstrate how she complicates that claim, you can use a sentence like this. So, however, Hugh's analysis of the kinds of organizational strategies that, quote unquote, second act social media activism has developed challenges Gladwell's claim that only hierarchies can form the internal structure necessary to perform high-risk activism. Okay, and let's spend a little time with that sentence to kind of break it down into its components. Okay, first, let's focus on the word however. So however serves as an effective transitional word in this case because who will be challenging or complicating the claim of Gladwell's that you have just discussed in the first half of your body paragraph. Okay, so it serves as an effective transitional word between Gladwell and Hugh because it's signaling to the reader that we're setting up a contrast between those two texts, right? And that's generally going to be the case for your body paragraphs. So, you may focus some discussion on how or in what ways who might agree with Gladwell's claims. But eventually, in order to fulfill the question of the prompt, we're going to have to focus on those ways that she challenges or complicates Gladwell's claims. That particular claim, right? That social media activism is not at all like the activism that took place during the civil rights movement, or what he calls traditional activism. So in other words, to kind of break down the prompt question, right? If you're still struggling a little bit with the language of complicating and challenging, you're using who to help find ways that social media activism in its second act is actually similar to the traditional activism we saw in the civil rights movement. Okay, so in other words, if Gladwell says the two are nothing alike, civil rights activism and social media activism, then for who to kind of complicate that claim, you need to show how second act social media activism is similar in some ways to the civil rights movement, that activism, traditional activism. Okay? And the ways your body paragraphs break down then is you're focusing on particular ways that perhaps social media activism is similar to the civil rights movement. Okay, and so, it makes sense for us to kind of start those body paragraphs with Gladwell, establishing a claim he makes about how a particular claim, right, breaking down this larger claim of, social media activism being not at all like traditional activism. So in what ways does he think that's the case? And then you shift over to who in the second half of the body paragraph to challenge that, right? Or to show that there's a similarity actually. Okay, and if we spend a little more time with this connection transition sentence, then we're looking at this phrase here. So organizational strategies that second act social media activism has developed. And so that's the particular claim from who that we're focusing on. And so we're highlighting this language here just as a reminder to make sure that you're making your connections as specific and detailed as possible, right? So we're not just kind of connecting Hugh and Gladwell in general, right? It's, okay, now I'm focusing on this particular claim from Gladwell and this particular claim from who. Okay, and then we shift over. So the particular claim from Gladwell that we're focusing on is that only hierarchies can form the internal structure necessary to perform what he calls high-risk activism. Okay, and so again, we're specifying that particular claim to help make our connection as specific as possible. Okay, so now what we've done is I've underlined the kind of core parts of Who's claim and Gladwell's claim. Okay, so for Who, she focuses then, or the focus on her text is on organizational strategies. Okay, and the focus for Gladwell, his claim then is on internal structure. And what that reveals to us then is that the link we've established between the two texts for this body paragraph, as we can see from these highlighted phrases, that link boils down to the concept of organization. Okay, and so that's what we're going to be calling our connecting concept. That'll be a key term we'll use in our body paragraph template. So in other words, what we're calling the connecting concept of the body paragraph, in other words, the connecting concept is the concept that links text A to text B. Okay, and in the particular case of this connection transition sentence, that's linking Gladwell to Who is the concept of organization. Okay, more specifically, it's a movement's ability to organize itself enough to engage in high-risk activism. Okay, and so why connecting concepts are important to figure out? And really, these connecting concepts only become clear when you're playing around with ideas, when you're organizing free writing, drafting a body paragraph, going back to revise. So it's a process to kind of boil things down to the concept, the specific concept that is linking those two texts, so that you make a nice direct connection between the texts, right? So that's going to be a really important focus for us as we move through the rest of the semester when we workshop, is making sure the connection we establish between the text and each body paragraph is direct as possible. Okay, and so once you figure out that connecting concept, then that should be the driving force behind which idea quotation you select from each text. Okay, so in other words, you want to pair quotations that have a concept in common. And you want to make this connecting concept clear to your reader in two key places in your body paragraph. Okay, the first place, you want to make it clear in the middle of the paragraph in your connection transition sentence, as we saw, and also in your topic sentence. So in other words, the core of the central claim that you make in each body paragraph and that you express in your topic sentence is the connection that you establish in that paragraph between the two texts, right? And so in other words, your topic sentence will be expressing or indicating to the reader what the connecting concept is going to be. So in other words, for our topic sentences, we're going to have some component of Gladwell and some component of Who connected together, right? And we're going to be doing a workshop on topic sentences, and we'll want to keep that in mind, right? Do these topic sentences integrate some kind of idea from Who and also some kind of idea from Gladwell? Okay, so when we perform IC for text B, we're going to start thinking about how that might be a little bit different than when we performed it for text A. Okay, so all in all, the IC method will function the same way the second time around, but with one exception. Okay, so when you perform IC for text B, you're going to do so in conversation with the IC you perform for text B. Okay, so text A, you got to discuss it, perform the IC method on that text all by itself. Okay, but now when you move through those steps of IC, right? So introducing a quotation, citing it, engaging it, explaining it, you're going to do that work in conversation with text A. Okay, so what this is going to look like, right? So again, we have introduce, cite, engage, and explain. The difference is largely going to be when you perform the two E's. Okay, so when you introduce a quotation and you cite it, you're staying focused on text B. However, when you get to engage, you're going to engage in relation to text A and explain in relation to text A. Okay, so in other words, when you get to engage for text B in the second half of your body paragraph, you're going to make the connection to text A. And then when you explain, you're going to explain the connection between the texts. Okay, so again, second time you perform IC, this time for text B in the second half of your body paragraph, engage and explain are different. So in the engage step, you make the connection, explain, you explain that connection. Okay, so let's break it down then for our engage step for text B. Okay, so you're engaging the quotation that you're bringing in from your second text. And all of this is the same as we performed it the first time around, right? So making sure the sentences that come after refer back to that quotation and work with it, making sure we're paraphrasing, translating the language into our own words, using some of these phrases that we're going to use to set up our paraphrase. Okay, so with the engage step, it's when we get to the second engagement of the quotation. Right? First engagement is to paraphrase, second engagement is to close read, analyze, interpret. So here we're going to do our connective work. Okay, so what we want to do then is when we're close reading, we're going to pull out language, a word, a phrase, or a key term or concept from the quotation that you want to work with, and you're going to re-quote it. Okay, so that part of the close reading process is exactly the same as it was for text A. So here you're focusing just on the quotation that you've brought in from text A. I'm sorry, text B. Okay, and here's the new part. So as you are close reading that language from your quotation from text B, you're going to pull down some language from the first half of your body paragraph from the quotation from text A. Okay, and so you're going to use that language from the quotation from text A to help make the connection to text B. Okay, so you're going to be exploring then what the language that you re-quoted from text B suggests, implies, reveals, emphasizes, indicates, right? All those close reading verbs. But you're going to be doing that in relation to the language you pulled down from the quotation from text A. So in other words, if you begin with Gladwell in the paragraph and then switch to who, when you discuss the quotation from who, you're going to bring down language from Gladwell's quotation to help you do so. Okay, so visually what this is going to look like is you're going to have smaller chunks or snippets of quotation from Gladwell drop down into the second half of the paragraph to where you're discussing who, right? And so in other words, the first half of the paragraph is all going to focus on Gladwell if you're starting with Gladwell. And then when you shift to who, some of the language from Gladwell is going to drop down into that paragraph. And you're going to be kind of fusing and synthesizing the language from both texts to help form that connection to make it nice and direct. Okay, so if we shift from the engage step to explain for text B, this time we're going to explain two things. Okay, so here we're going to explain how the quotation from text B connects to the quotation from text A, right? So when you're engaging, you're making that connection. And then when you shift to explain, you want to make sure that that connection is clear to your reader, right? You want to explain how that connection is happening. Okay, the second thing you're going to explain is how the connection that you've established between the quotations from text A and text B, right? A connection you've made by dropping down some of the language from the first text into the second half of the body paragraph. So you're going to explain how that connection supports the claim that you made in your topic sentence, right? So in other words, how that connection supports the central claim of the paragraph. Okay, and that ties back in then to that connecting concept that we express then in the middle of the paragraph when we transition between texts, and also in our topic sentence for the paragraph. Okay, so in other words, we're tying the connection that we've made between text A and text B back into the topic sentence, right? So you kind of come through, you set up your topic sentence, you perform IC for text A, connect, transition, IC for text B, and then you pull it back into the claim made in your topic sentence. Okay, so if we return then to the basic structure of a body paragraph, we're going to fill this in a little bit this time. Okay, so again, we of course are starting with our topic sentence, the 1 to 2 sentences at the beginning of the paragraph that establish our connecting concept, the connection we're making in the text, and the topic sentence links that connection back to the thesis statement, the answer to the quiz question, or not the quiz question, the question, the prompt for essay 1 rather. Okay, and then again, we perform IC for text A, IC for text B, but now we want to fill in where we do our connective work. Okay, so again, when we shift from IC text A to IC text B, we need a connection transition sentence or two, right? And then when we're performing IC for text B, we're going to make the connection and we're going to explain the connection. Okay, so really, again, the connective work happens in the second half of the body paragraph, right? So here with the topic sentence, performing IC for text A, that's the first half of the paragraph. And then this is our midpoint. And the second half of the paragraph then is making and explaining the connection. Okay, so now that's it for the second part of our body paragraph template. And so we'll do a quick review and then I'll send you on your way. Okay, so for our first question, so which 2 of the 4 steps that comprise our IC method are different when you perform them for text B in the second half of your body paragraph? Okay, so the 2 steps that are different the second time around for the IC method, engage and explain. And next question, so what is different about the engage step when you perform it for text B in the second half of your body paragraph? Okay, and so when we do the engage step the second time around, paraphrasing is the same, but the second engage step, close reading, analyzing, interpreting, that's what's different. And so what's different here is we're pulling down language from the quotation from text A to help us make the connection to text B. And we're exploring what the language that we re-quoted from text B suggests, implies, reveals, close reading verbs in relation to the language that we pulled down for text A. Okay, next question. So what's different about the explain step the second time around, our second E? Is that, well, what is different about that explain step the second time around is that you need to explain 2 things this time, right? So with the first round of IC focused on text A, you're explaining how the quotation supports the claim you're making in the paragraph. Okay, here, when we do it the second time, we need to explain 2 things. Okay, I was getting a little ahead of myself that time. All right, so what are these 2 things that you need to explain in the second half of your body paragraph? Okay, so explaining how the quotation from text B connects to the quotation from text A, and explaining how the connection that you've established between those 2 quotations supports the claim that you've made in your topic sentence. Okay, so now let's think forward. So as you think about the kinds of revisions you'll be making to your rough draft of essay 1 for the final draft that's due on Wednesday, 10/7, I just wanted to clarify that because I think in the previous video, I was saying Wednesday the 7th, but I think my screen was showing Monday or Friday the 2nd, something like that. Okay, so the final draft is due Wednesday, 10/7. Okay, so as you're thinking about that, think about how you can use this body paragraph template that we've worked up for reorganizing, clarifying, and more fully developing your body paragraphs. Okay, and so this template can help make sure that you've included all of the elements you need to make a successful connection between the texts. And once you've completed these videos, next up will be a group work activity that will ask you to apply our body paragraph template and its key terms to sample responses to quiz 3. Okay, and so that activity will help us think about how we might integrate some of the work we did for quiz 3 into our rough drafts of essay 1. All right, so that is our final edition of Building Body Paragraphs. And have a good night, and I'll see you next time.